Aminata Diallo stepped off the plane in Conakry, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of her Lagos business trip. At just 26, she had already made a name for herself as a determined, sharp-minded entrepreneur. But this trip had been different. For 2 intense weeks, she had pitched, negotiated, and networked, and now it had paid off. Her first major contract, worth a staggering $1.2 million, was officially hers. The thought alone made her chest swell with pride. She imagined the moment she would walk through the front door, greeted by her parents' proud smiles and maybe even a small celebration. She pictured her mother fussing over her luggage and her father clapping her on the back, telling everyone how his daughter had made it big. The excitement made her quicken her pace as she neared the familiar street of her family home. But as Aminata approached the house, something felt off. The street, usually filled with the chatter of neighbors and the distant laughter of children, was eerily quiet. The front door stood closed as if daring her to knock. She could hear nothing from inside, no footsteps, no voices, not even the faint sound of her mother humming in the kitchen. Her heart skipped a beat, a small prickling fear rising in her chest. Something was wrong. The warm, welcoming home she had always known now felt cold and uninviting. Aminata paused on the threshold, gripping her suitcase tighter. The air around her felt heavy, almost weighting, as if the house itself knew the storm about to hit. And in that instant, she sensed that her triumphant return might not be the joyful homecoming she had imagined. Aminata knocked on the front door, her knuckles tapping nervously against the wood. "Mom, Dad," she called, her voice bright with hope, imagining a warm welcome. But silence answered her. After a long moment, the door creaked slightly, and then Musa Diallo's shadow appeared behind it. His face was stiff, his eyes cold. "I'm busy," he said gruffly, before pulling the door shut without another word. Aminata's heart sank, but she refused to step back. She knocked again, harder this time, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. The door opened a crack, then slammed in her face. Confused, she peered around the corner and froze. Her clothes, her luggage, even the small boxes of personal items she had packed with care were scattered across the street. Shirts were trampled in the dust, her shoes lay in disarray, her suitcase was torn open, papers and belongings spilling out. Her heart hammered in her chest. It was one thing to be delayed or ignored. It was another to be humiliated like this. From the doorway, Kadiata Diallo appeared, her expression icy and unreadable. "You're too ambitious, too independent," she said calmly, almost like reading from a script. "We have no place for your kind here." Her words hit Aminata like a blow. Every dream, every hope of a proud welcome crumbled instantly. For a moment, Aminata just stood there, numb. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them. She could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down, the sting of her own family rejecting her at the very moment she had achieved something extraordinary. But beneath the shock and heartbreak, something else began to stir. A quiet, fierce flame of anger. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. She would not let them see her break. Not now. Not ever. Her heart ached, but her mind was already racing, spinning ideas, strategies, a plan to rise above this humiliation. Musa and Kadiata might have tried to destroy her in that moment, but they had no idea that burning inside Aminata was the beginning of her comeback, and it would be unstoppable. Aminata walked aimlessly through the bustling streets of Conakry, her suitcase trailing behind her like a heavy reminder of the life she'd been forced out of. The colorful market stalls, normally vibrant and full of life, felt strange and unwelcoming now. People moved past her, shouting prices for fruits and fabrics, but she barely noticed. Her mind was spinning, replaying her parents' cruel words over and over. She felt humiliated, exposed, homeless in her own city. Every few steps, she caught whispers and sideways glances. Vendors nudged each other, neighbors murmured. "Did you see what the Diallo girl's parents did?" Someone threw her belongings out on the street like trash. Aminata's stomach twisted. She kept her head down, trying to avoid recognition, but inside, a slow-burning anger began to take root. How dare they think they could humiliate her and get away with it? She ducked into a quiet corner, away from the crowd, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook slightly as she opened her business accounts, half afraid of what she might see. Then relief and triumph washed over her. Her Lagos contract had cleared. The $1.2 million was hers. Every penny, every promise, every sleepless night spent working toward this moment was real. She wasn't broke. She wasn't powerless. Aminata leaned against a wall, taking a deep breath. The humiliation she felt now could be turned into something else. Fuel, fire, determination. Her parents thought they had crushed her, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know the kind of woman she was. In that moment, standing in the crowded market street, she started mentally plotting her comeback. She would rise. She would protect herself. And when the time came, she would make sure the world, including her parents, saw just how unstoppable she could be. For the first time since being thrown out, a A small smile tugged at her lips. The anger and shame were still there, simmering, but now mixed with possibility. This was the beginning of her revenge, her independence, her empire. And Aminata Diallo, once humiliated, was already imagining the moment she would stand taller than anyone had ever imagined. Aminata's hands were still shaking when she finally dialed Adama Kuiat's number. Adama wasn't just a friend, she was a mentor, a successful businesswoman in Conakry who had guided Aminata through her first steps in entrepreneurship. Aminata hesitated for a moment, then pressed call, hoping Adama would answer, hoping someone could understand her humiliation and betrayal. "Hello, Aminata?" Adama's warm, calm voice answered, immediately putting her at ease. Aminata took a deep breath and explained everything, her parents' rejection, the thrown-out belongings, the humiliation on the streets. She tried to keep her voice steady, but cracks of anger and hurt slipped through. "Of course, Aminata," Adama said without hesitation. "Come straight to Plateau. You can stay at my apartment. You'll be safe, and we'll figure this out together." Relief crashed over Aminata like a wave. In that instant, she felt hope returning. She wasn't alone. Someone powerful, someone who believed in her, had her back. By the time she arrived at the luxurious apartment in Plateau, Aminata felt a spark of determination lighting up inside her. The space was spacious, elegant, and calming, a stark contrast to the chaos and coldness she had left behind. As she unpacked the few belongings she still had, her mind was already racing. She thought about the Lagos contract, the money waiting in her accounts, and the life she was determined to build. Sitting by the window and gazing out over the city, Aminata began mapping her plan. First, secure her wealth and make it untouchable. Then, expose her parents' hypocrisy to the world, but on her terms. And above all, protect herself legally so no one, not even her own family, could ever humiliate her like this again. She could feel the fire inside her growing stronger. For the first time in days, Aminata smiled. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was planning, preparing, and building the foundation of a comeback that no one would see coming. Plateau wasn't just a temporary refuge. It was her launching point, the place where her independence, power, and revenge would take shape. And Aminata Diallo, once betrayed and homeless, was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Aminata had barely settled into Adama's apartment when whispers started reaching her from the outside world. Through mutual friends and casual conversations in Conakry, she learned what her parents were doing while she rebuilt her life. Musa and Kadiata Diallo were boasting to relatives, neighbors, and family friends about disowning their reckless daughter. They laughed about how she had been thrown out of her home, painting themselves as the wise, disciplined parents who had rid themselves of a troublemaker. At first, Aminata felt a pang of anger. The audacity of them, speaking so proudly of something so cruel. But as she listened more closely, the shock turned into quiet amusement. They hadn't just mocked her, they had actively tried to erase her life. Some of her clothes and personal belongings had been sold for petty cash, her suitcase emptied and scattered like trash. Her parents clearly believed she was penniless, powerless, and dependent on them. Aminata chuckled softly to herself, a sound that held more strength than amusement. They had no idea about her Lagos contract, no clue about the $1.2 million that now sat in her account. They thought she was struggling, vulnerable, a girl they could push around, and yet, they had underestimated her completely. Every boast, every arrogant laugh from her parents, only fueled the fire inside her. Sitting on the balcony of Adama's apartment, Aminata allowed herself a private moment of satisfaction. She pictured her parents' faces if they knew the truth, how foolish they would feel realizing that their reckless daughter had turned their betrayal into power. The tiny details of their arrogance, their underestimation, were no longer hurtful, they were opportunities. In that moment, Aminata felt a shift inside herself. The humiliation she had felt on the street, the shock of being thrown out, it all began to transform. Her parents' arrogance had given her clarity and focus. Every boast they made, every careless act, was now a stepping stone for her plan. They thought they had broken her, but instead, they had unwittingly provided her with the motivation to rise higher than they ever imagined. And Aminata Diallo was ready to do just that. Aminata felt a surge of pride the day she officially registered her Lagos contract under her own company, Diallo Innovations. After years of hard work, sleepless nights, and learning the ropes of entrepreneurship, she finally had a name and a brand that belonged entirely to her. This wasn't just a contract, it was her independence, her ticket to proving to herself and the world that she didn't need anyone to define her worth. With Adama's guidance and her own sharp instincts, Aminata began exploring opportunities across West Africa. She studied tech startups, emerging businesses, and innovative ideas, quietly investing in ventures that showed promise. Every transaction was calculated, every move deliberate. Soon, her investments began growing, quietly stacking up into a portfolio worth $5 million. $5 million. She couldn't help the small, victorious smile that crept onto her face every time she checked the numbers. All the while, she maintained her act around her parents. Musa and Kadiata still believed she was struggling, still thought she depended on the kindness of friends or the hope of their approval. Aminata played the part well, keeping her successes hidden, letting them continue their narrative of her as the reckless, ambitious girl who had nowhere to go. She attended family gatherings with a careful mix of humility and quiet confidence, letting them underestimate her further. Every glance they threw, every condescending word, was fuel for her fire. In private, Aminata's mind raced with possibilities. Her wealth wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. Freedom from her parents' judgment, freedom from humiliation, freedom to chart her own path. Each investment, each business decision, was a step closer to the life she envisioned, one where she controlled her destiny, where betrayal could never touch her again. By the time she leaned back in the comfort of Adama's apartment one evening, Aminata realized something profound. She wasn't just building a business, she was building herself. Every strategic move, every quiet victory, was proof that she was unstoppable. Her independence wasn't just financial, it was emotional, intellectual, and deeply personal. And while her parents remained blind to her success, Aminata was already planning the moment they would finally see her power and regret underestimating her. Aminata took a deep breath as she prepared for the meeting she had invited her parents to. She called it a family discussion, carefully crafting the invitation so it sounded like she wanted reconciliation. Musa and Kadiatu, still confident in their belief that she was struggling and dependent, accepted without hesitation. They thought they would lecture her, scold her, maybe even get her to beg for forgiveness. They had no idea what was coming. The day of the meeting, Aminata dressed simply, keeping up the appearance of modesty. She wanted them to underestimate her one last time. Her heart raced as she led them into the sleek, modern space she had rented for the gathering, casually positioning her laptop and tablet where everyone could see them. Musa and Kadiatu exchanged smug smiles, already ready to mock her. "So, my reckless daughter finally wants to talk?" her father said with a smirk. Her mother added, "Let's see if she has anything worthwhile to say this time." Aminata smiled faintly, letting the condescension roll off her. She had patience, and she had power, quiet, controlled power. When the right moment came, she clicked open her laptop, showing the first screen, contracts, legal registrations, and screenshots of her bank account. "This," she said calmly, "is Diallo Innovations, and these are the other companies I own." One by one, she revealed tech startups she had invested in, her growing portfolio, and evidence of deals across West Africa. Her parents' expressions froze. Shock, disbelief, and embarrassment replaced their smugness. Mouse's jaw tightened, Kadiata's eyes widened. For the first time, they realized they had completely misjudged her. Yet Aminata didn't show everything. She didn't reveal the full extent of her empire, the wealth she had quietly accumulated, or the strategies she was still building. That moment would come later, carefully, when she wanted the final impact to hit hard. Instead, she leaned back and let the silence settle. She didn't need to say more. The message was clear. The reckless, dependent girl they had mocked was now a woman in control, powerful and untouchable. Aminata had turned their arrogance against them, but she was still holding the ultimate reveal. The first confrontation had ended, but the game was far from over, and Aminata Diallo knew she was winning. Aminata's next move came when she uncovered the shocking truth about her parents' handling of her property. Through careful investigation and conversations with mutual contacts, she learned that Musa and Kadiatu had used her house in Conakry as collateral for personal debts, without her knowledge or permission. The realization hit hard, but instead of anger taking over, a clear plan began to form in her mind. They thought they could exploit her, take what was hers, and get away with it. Aminata wasn't about to let that happen. With Adama's guidance and a trusted lawyer, Aminata filed all the necessary legal documents to reclaim ownership of the house. She also included claims for the other assets her parents had misappropriated or sold for petty cash. Every piece of evidence was carefully documented: bank statements, receipts, contracts, and witness statements. Aminata had learned to play the game on her terms, and she intended to win. The court day arrived, and the tension in the air was thick. Musa and Kadiata sat before the judge, faces pale and tense, while neighbors and extended family members filled the courtroom, murmuring in curiosity. Aminata walked in confidently, composed, dressed smartly, radiating calm authority. Her parents' smugness was gone. They suddenly understood that this was serious. As the judge reviewed the evidence, Aminata presented her case clearly and calmly. Screenshots, contracts, and proof of the Lagos funds were laid out meticulously. Each piece of evidence hit hard, leaving Musa and Kadiatu unable to speak, their earlier arrogance crumbling in front of everyone. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as family friends realized the depth of the betrayal. The parents had publicly humiliated their daughter, and now they were being exposed in the same space. When the verdict was announced in Aminata's favor, the courtroom erupted, not with cheers for her parents, but with quiet shock and admiration for Aminata's determination and intelligence. She smiled slightly, feeling a rush of vindication and empowerment. The house was hers again, and with it came the message loud and clear. She was no longer vulnerable, no longer powerless, and no one, not even her own parents, could manipulate or humiliate her again. That day marked a turning point. Aminata had taken legal control of her life, reclaimed what was rightfully hers, and shown everyone, including her parents, that betrayal could be met with strategy, patience, and undeniable strength. The night of Aminata's gala arrived, and her newly acquired luxury villa in Conakry sparkled under the lights, a symbol of her hard-earned success. She had invited West African entrepreneurs, investors, and mentors to celebrate innovation, growth, and collaboration. The air buzzed with excitement, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Aminata moved gracefully among the guests, smiling, confident, and in complete control of the evening. Musa and Kadiatu had accepted the invitation, expecting to see their daughter humbled, perhaps even groveling for reconciliation. They walked in with smug expressions, certain that Aminata's success was limited and that she still needed their approval. But from the moment they stepped into the villa, it became clear that nothing could be further from the truth. The grandeur of the setting, the crowd of influential people, and the energy of the event all spoke louder than any words. As the night unfolded, Aminata took the stage. She began by thanking her mentors, friends, and business partners, people like Adama Kouiate, who had guided her when she had nowhere else to turn. She spoke about her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the power of determination and resilience. Carefully, she hinted at betrayal and obstacles overcome without ever naming her parents. Sometimes, she said, the people we expect to support us the most are the ones who doubt us. But that doubt can become the strongest fuel for success. The audience erupted in applause, and whispers of admiration spread through the crowd. Her parents sat frozen, their faces pale, realizing with growing horror that the girl they had tried to humiliate had not only survived but soared far beyond their reach. Every story Aminata shared, every achievement she highlighted, every deal and growth metric displayed, reminded them silently of their underestimation. By the end of the evening, the villa was alive with celebration, networking, and joy, all centered around Aminata's vision and leadership. Musa and Kadiatu left in stunned silence, unable to confront the truth of how entirely their daughter had surpassed them. Aminata watched from the balcony as the city lights of Conakry glittered below, feeling a mix of pride, satisfaction, and anticipation. This was her total comeback, not just reclaiming her life, her wealth, and her dignity, but showing the world that betrayal could be transformed into triumph. And for Aminata Diallo, this gala was only the beginning of her unstoppable ride. Aminata sat at her desk, penning the final piece of her journey, a formal letter to her parents. Calm and composed, she listed their misdeeds, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the selfish acts that had once shaken her world. But this time, she wasn't writing out of pain or anger, she was writing from a place of power. Every word made it clear that they no longer held any control over. She had reclaimed her home, her wealth, and her dignity. Musa and Kadiatu could no longer touch her, no matter how much they wished to. After sending the letter, Aminata turned her focus outward. She donated $100,000 to support women entrepreneurs across Guinea, helping those with talent, but without opportunity. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed, but she also knew the power of using that pain to lift others up. Each donation was more than money. It was a message. Betrayal could be transformed into strength, and power could be shared with those who truly deserved it. As the sun began to set, Aminata stepped out onto the terrace of her villa. The golden light bathed Conakry in warmth, and the city stretched below her, full of life and opportunity. She breathed in deeply, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and freedom. Her empire was just beginning, and her family's humiliation complete. Aminata smiled confidently, knowing she had turned every obstacle into a stepping stone. The streets where she had once wandered humiliated, the marketplace where whispers had followed her, the parents who had doubted her, all of it was behind her now. Ahead lay power, independence, and the legacy she was building not just for herself, but for every woman daring enough to claim her place. Aminata Diallo had risen, unstoppable, unshakable, and unstoppable in her pursuit of greatness.